Hey yo, hello. What's up other than the moon? Midnight Ricochet here, everybody. This video is going to be a little different, and we're going to be taking a temporary pause from my immersive storytelling, as I appreciate being called. Uh, if you don't know, a few weeks ago, a fellow content creator by the name of Jiggyyy made a video titled "The Woman Who Lost Everything to Censorship," and this video pisses me off, to say the least. To start, I want to make it clear not to attack anyone or throw hate out there to him just because of his opinions. Everyone is allowed to feel how they feel, and you shouldn't make them feel worse just because they feel differently. Now that that's been said, let's get to the meat of things. I'm going to break this down into 3 sections, matching his 3 major sections in his video. And there will be timestamps in the description for each of these sections. First, the beginning and the stereotype conversation. Let's start just by listening to what he has to say.
Rouge's consistent reduction to her body proportions and unnecessary cover-ups are directly correlated to the stalemate that her character currently finds itself in.
So far, nothing is inherently wrong with what he's saying, but I'm wondering what exactly the stalemate he's referring to is.
From Seductress of the Night to Co-worker of the Day, her assets were the foundation of her character and helped establish the role she played so well as soon as she hit the scene.
Let's break this down, shall we? I've watched the full video, but even if I hadn't, I can tell where this is going. And if it wasn't clear what he was saying already, it's that Rouge having a smaller bust size and getting more covered up is a bad thing, because it's painting her character differently. For so many reasons, this is wrong, and I'm going to talk more in depth about each of his points as he brings them up. But his first major statement is that her
assets
were purely the foundation of her character, which is just entirely untrue. Yes, they sold her as this extremely womanly figure, but they were not the only thing important to what made her so great. First and foremost, the writing in SA2 is where Rouge shined, and every appearance since, I feel, has done a wonderful job at portraying Rouge in a genuine way, despite her smaller roles. Continuing on, he goes over a brief history of Rouge and her introduction into the Sonic world in SA2. And for some reason, he also goes on to talk about bats, and no joke, although briefly, he does stop to talk about bat breast areas, which I just find funny. More specifically, he points out the type of bat Rouge most closely appears to be inspired by, as well as how its origins relate to Rouge's design. I think that this part of the video stands well on its own, because he mostly just talks about how she fills the femme fatale archetype, and how her
assets
assist in showcasing her archetype, which is just true statements all around. However, it's when he begins talking about people underestimating her looks is where it goes awry. He first starts with her introduction scene, and I'm not going to go back to play Sonic Adventure 2, or even look it up, because I want to take his word for what it says.
Rouge even straight up tells them that her looks are often the reason why misconceptions are formed about her. Something that gets proven in the very next scene by an Eggman whose tone insinuates he still doesn't believe her to be the treasure hunter she claims to be.
While I can understand the point he's trying to say Rouge is making here, it's often just true about everyone. Looks are deceiving, and often when people see you for the first time, they have an immediate reaction of forming thoughts about you based on how you look. However, I believe that Eggman's distrust of her doesn't come from the fact she's a woman, but rather the fact that he's never even heard of her, and she, up till this point, has only done one notable thing, that being breaking into Eggman's base, which isn't exactly going to get someone to trust you. But that's just my interpretation, so let's keep going.
While this could be chalked up to the Doctor's skepticism on her true identity, he's now been in 3 different scenarios with her where the conversation topic is around stealing jewels, but Rouge has only shown herself to be capable in one, back on the Ark when she handed over the Blue Emerald.
Oh, look at that. He immediately goes on to talk about that exact point, how Eggman is more than reasonable to be distrusting of her. So, what was even the point of bringing this up? Oh, he's just gonna keep going? That's fine, I guess. He then points out the outright sexual outfits Rouge has in this game, and how Sonic Team has shown they aren't afraid to put their characters in more adult costumes. Of course, given that they are adults, because if you aren't aware, most characters in Sonic, until their ages were made non canon recently, were just teenagers. Rouge being one of two women explicitly stated to be otherwise. But he also puts this conversation down, supposedly for later. His next major point is the following.
But slowly and surely, people began to take notice of the bigger picture. Costume, skin tone, body proportion, and voice direction changes, factors that she came into the world of Sonic the Hedgehog with, were being stripped away until Rouge was a husk of her former self.
Which I can only disagree with on so many levels. Towards the end of the video, I'll get more into why these points are invalid, but right now I'll focus on his next point, which is trying to counter an argument that things like appearance from design and clothes are not important to a character, which I don't know who would make that argument in any series, especially one with as many characters as Sonic. A character's appearance is, among other things, what help a character stand out and remain memorable. He then lists characters from the series and how their design remains unchanging and significantly recognizable, and then said,
When it comes to Rouge, however, she's the only character that's undergone changes to her everyday outfit and body type, ultimately leading to a misunderstanding of her overall importance in the history of the Sonic franchise is for newcomers.
which to that I can only allow someone who understands Sonic better than anyone else I know speak.
Hey Slayers, it's me, Sega Slayer 64, the one and only world's coolest Sega enthusiast, and Midnight Ricochet had to enlist the help of your boy, the one and only world's coolest Sega enthusiast, the arbiter on all things Sonic the Hedgehog and Sega, to help him out with this discussion, right? So, to break things down in a simple and quick to digest little argument here, I can disprove Jiggy's points, or at least prove one of them wrong in less than a couple seconds. So one, his point that Rouge the Bat is the only character to have undergone a significant change in the Sonic franchise since her debut is completely wrong, and any real Sonic fan would know this is wrong simply based on the fact that Knuckles the Echidna exists. Knuckles the Echidna, for all those who know him and love him, he's my favorite character in the series, in the franchise, right? He used to be a loner, little bit gullible, but a keep to himself type of strong individual who was focused on his mission and his role in guarding the Master Emerald, and he was hyper focused on that, and he was quiet, but he also knew when it was time to step up and work with Sonic and his friends when he needed to do so, right? Into a completely stupid and dumb jock who barely had any idea what was going on half the time in the modern day Sonic franchise whenever he was used. So, Jiggy's point that Rouge is the only one who's undergone some form of transformation personality wise is just completely false, and any Sonic fan would know that. And Knuckles is only one of the examples. I could bring out countless others, like Silver, for example. Now, to go on about his point about why Rouge the Bat has changed, there's a logical explanation as to why Rouge the Bat clothing is no longer as explicit as it used to be. And that's the fact that the Sonic franchise has literally changed demographics, okay? For all those who know Sonic from his debut, Sonic was focused more on teens and young adults. AKA, Sega had a more marketing style to having Sonic be more edgy and his characters be more teen and adult focused than children focused, right? But the Sonic franchise, as years have gone on, has begun to appeal more and more and more to children. Most children under the age of 10, right? To the point, Sonic fans like you or me, who are like, I'm 22, for example, Sonic fans like you and me who grew up with the series and who are now teens and young adults, the series is not aimed at us anymore. It is aimed at children 10 and under. So it only makes sense that Rouge the Bat would be covered up a little to show less skin. The idea that this somehow changes or ruins her character, when, let's be frank here, Rouge hasn't been a significant character in a game since '06, and she hasn't been a main character since Heroes, arguably SA2, since I feel Shadow overshadows her in Heroes more than anything else, even though it's a team-based thing. So, the idea that Rouge, a character who's barely in the games or on screen anymore, right, in terms of the mainline Sonic universe, the idea that her clothes changing has changed her personality is completely ridiculous, and I think a disingenuous proposition to share with your viewers, right? The Sonic franchise has changed. It is no longer for children. It is no longer for teens and adults. It's now for children. And the idea that Rouge having to cover up a little bit more has ruined her personality is just ridiculous. I'm sorry. Now back to you, Midnight.
Thank you, Sega Slayer, and now let's see what he has to say next.
But let's stop beating around the bush. The covering above and elimination of her once larger breast, subtraction of hips, and additional clothing lengths detract from the initial vision of Rouge the Bat.
I'm failing to see how any of that subtracts from her character. Even if the initial vision was the seductress of the night, how does that take away from the good writing and still very well-designed character?
A capable fighter and spy who utilizes her brain and deductive reasoning to get jobs done, while still self-acknowledging that the assets she was born with are a great tool to use at her disposal. All the while not purposely bringing attention to them, since that would only serve to ruin what she sets out to do.
Alright, I completely agree with that. This is a wonderful description of Rouge's character, and it still is that character. That hasn't changed, even if the way she looks has. He continues to point out again what exactly the archetype she fills is, that being the femme fatale, and says that taking away the things that make her feminine, quote-unquote, takes away the point of the archetype. However, I have to entirely disagree. She still more than embodies the femme fatale archetype, which literally translates to deadly woman, which, while often portrayed through a sexy and beautiful woman, can also be filled by other roles. I mean, I personally would classify a thief in the night who uses her charm and wit and femininity in general to her advantage as just that, even if she's not this busty, curvaceous stereotype.
Remember when I said earlier that we'd have to tackle a hard conversation? Yeah, this is it, so I'll try my best to do it as gracefully as possible. Back during her debut, Rouge could have easily possessed any build her creators wanted, and what they wanted just so happened to be an age-old depiction of a woman that's seductive, cunning, curvaceous, and always has a plan no matter what. Was Rouge the product of Hollywood's late 90s to early 2000s model example of popular Latin American actresses? 1000%. However, for players engaging with Sonic Adventure 2 for the first time, they saw a mysterious new individual that was able to rival the burliest member of Team Sonic. Her extra assets were of no less importance, yet still secondary to the badassery she exuded. So, what happened after this?
Before we get into, as he says, what happened, let's be clear, he said it himself that her
assets
were secondary to her badassery, and that should be remembered and kept in mind.
The Sonic series has had a problem with the homogenization of all their characters, but namely female heroes in this instance. Most of them have similar body types, skin tones, etc., typically resulting in petite waist, maybe being shorter than most of their male counterparts, and soft-spoken. This, ironically, leads to a complete lack of diversity and representation within this franchise.
Whoa, hold up. There is no way he just said a lack of representation and diversity. I can name on neither of my hands how many characters in Sonic, especially the women, that even remotely look alike, aside from the mother-daughter duo, which, you know, mother and daughter. There is no reason for him to say this, especially not if he takes into account the most popular female Sonic's characters. Rouge, Blaze, Amy, all he showed in video are nothing alike. Blaze is such a wonderful character on her own, and she is amazing because she's one of the few, maybe even only, non-Hedgehog characters who can keep up with Sonic. She also has an incredible story and world surrounding her. Amy, especially in modern Sonic, has grown so much into a mature but still kind and caring person who isn't afraid to speak her mind for what she feels is right. And Rouge, the key figure of this video, is still, regardless of her appearance, a great fit and great representation of her archetype. An utter lack of understanding the uniqueness of these characters only continues in his focus on surface-level details in their designs and complete misunderstandings of their characters. As he says, they blend together and are samey. when all of these girls have incredibly unique silhouettes and distinct color palettes, and then suggests that it would be hard for newcomers to believe there's any real difference between these characters, which is its own issue. I don't want to touch that.
Arguments can and have been made that the Sonic franchise is a kid's one, and therefore shouldn't focus on the over-sexualization of its characters. I agree with this take.
Okay, so far we're on the same page, and we continue to be for about a minute, until he says,
What does not make sense, however, is thinking that a woman having a more voluptuous body that can't always be 100% covered due to said fullness is inherently sexual.
oh boy, I'm gonna get yelled at for this one. I get what he's saying, but I do have to disagree, especially when he goes to point out how her suit changes have been made. Showing more skin is inherently sexual. Even if it wasn't always, it most certainly is now, for both men and women. It's seen this way whether we like it or not, and while I personally believe leaving this kind of stuff in to a certain degree should be fine, I think slimming Rouge's front side down and covering her up a little more makes a ton of sense. When you look at Sonic's target audience, and inherently arguing against it just because you think certain designs are uglier is not an argument that holds up. Especially when you say something like,
The suit from Heroes is tasteful and honestly preferable to a lot of people. It leaves just enough to the imagination.
again, this is a franchise for children, and the imagination shouldn't really be doing anything with that. You just sound, frankly, perverted. Going further by saying changing her design makes her role less believable is also just incorrect, especially when you go and start trashing the suit from Prime, which, to me at least, looks like the kind of thing a character like her would wear. He continues to only further prove himself invalid by pointing out my previous statement that femme fatales come in many shapes and sizes, and without saying much else, after just leaves it at,
It didn't start out this way, and the countless refreshes that she's been going through have stripped away what people knew her initial design to lean into.
which on its own can be understandable, but that doesn't discount her current design. And in fact, it should be good that they're finally settling on a design to stop all these changes, even if it's not the original. The final two things he points out are coloration and her voice, both very clearly opinionated points that I won't attack, which is why I wanted to put those away from earlier after the other discussion. To end the video, he wraps it up by summarizing his thoughts and asking a question about the opinion of his fans on Rouge's design. Personally, I think this video goes out of its way to misunderstand not just Rouge, but the female Sonic characters as a whole, and disingenuously leaves their impression as boring and uninteresting, when they are anything but. Hopefully, if he ever sees this video, he can understand where I and Marvin come from and why we are upset with his take, especially when he's portraying it so matter-of-factly. Remember, in the meantime, don't send any hate to this guy. I've left his video in the description below, and I've also, if you aren't aware, have a Discord. It's a partner Discord with me and Marvin. It's also in the description down below. I hope you guys enjoyed. Have a good one. Leave a like, subscribe, and good night.